Catus Maximus here, found another ratchet to do a video on. These Armstrongs actually online can be found for less than $40, like new old stock. I paid $1 for this and I don't feel so bad about it. Kind of like that video about that Makita 5000 mg magnesium side winder saw. Only paid 25 bucks for it. So even though it had a broken depth adjustment, it's, you know, it was cheap enough to accept its flaws. Like this Armstrong appears to be one of the last before they went out of business because it has a more modern logo. Somebody put some really deep notches in this handle. I don't know if that's to indicate that it was theirs. They don't have a name etched on it. Or if they didn't think that the knurling, which is already pretty aggressive on it, I really like knurling, apparently they didn't think it was aggressive enough. So they butchered the handle, I guess to give them even more grip. Either way, you know, truthfully, it doesn't affect the operation of the ratchet. I was going to make a joke about how that grinding on the handle now makes it, you have the inability to actually mount sockets to it or actually ratchet and work with fasteners. But in the reality, for $1, I'll keep it in my collection because it's an Armstrong and it's definitely been pretty well used. There's quite a bit of wear on the anvil. And actually, I don't mind tools like this just because when they're really heavy duty, this is still a low amount of wear. It is a twin Pawl system. You can tell just by ratcheting it. Kind of hear a tick-tock sound. So since the clicks aren't exactly the same sound each time, you can even see how the lever kind of, or the reverse knob, rocks back and forth depending on the tension. Anyway, that's the easy way to tell it's a twin Pawl. What I do like, and something that's actually pretty rare for round head ratchets, is they actually have an off and on stamped into the top. It does have a little spinner thing, which I don't mind, but I kind of like that, the off and on, kind of like snap-on, what a lot of manufacturers do with pair head ratchets. It's just really rare on a round head to have the off and on, so that's a nice touch. Another thing is they actually have pretty good machining tolerances. With round head ratchets, they tend to have a lot more anvil play just because there's lower tolerances. They tend to grind the head just to, like, you know, as thin as it needs to be to make sure that all the anvils that they put in will fit. This is from all sorts of manufacturers. I've reviewed tons of round head ratchets. But to really grind the thickness of this head to, you know, 10 thousandths or whatever, 15 thousandths of an inch. Wanted to interject this somewhere in this video real fast before I've forgotten, so I'm just interjecting that. I always do compare, you know, the old Williams and Blackhawks, the Bonnies. A lot of these old round head ratchets had some particularly large heads. They just threw a lot of steel at them, but that wasn't always necessary. This happens to be a Giller, but this is a New Britain. New Britain made a bunch of different brands of ratchets. And New Britons are hard to beat. They have what's known as the Kilness design. It's like a floating pawl, kind of like a mechanism that a pair head ratchet uses, but adapted for a round head. And it's a really strong design. And I was going to mention this Giller here. One of the things about the New Britain ones is kind of the semi-Chevrolet logo reverse knob you always know. Secondly is, like this, pretty easy to reverse this Armstrong. Has a pretty good detent, but it's not too bad. The thing about the New Britons is they're always kind of small and they always have a really strong spring. It's due to the way there's an over-center spring inside. So always kind of a stiff reverse lever, but then really low back drag. As a matter of fact, if we compare to the Armstrong has really strong springs, but this Giller does have less back drag. And the biggest difference about the New Britain design, the Kilness design, is this. We'll line these up side by side. Quite a bit smaller of a head, and how much more compact it is. From the height of the reverse switch, you can just see this Armstrong it's like 30% taller than this New Britain design ratchet. When push comes to shove, I don't know which one would fail first. to tell you the truth, whether the anvil would shear, or maybe the head might split, or maybe the pawl, the ratchet mechanism might split. I don't know which one of these would ultimately be stronger, but I do know these new Britain ratchets really have proven themselves. And it's just kind of funny to still see just how much smaller this new Britain design is compared to this Armstrong. This Armstrong does have just a, well, I'll get that more line, just has just a huge head on it. They did throw a lot of steel at it, part of why I feel so confident in the reliability of this ratchet. It's a bit more expensive, means that all your sanding and grinding equipment just needs to be a little bit more in order. And I was talking about that because this is actually a pretty darn tight anvil. Both directions, there is very little play, especially considering it's a round head ratchet. Really like that, even though it operates smoothly, even though it's well used and hasn't been lubed in forever. Pretty strong detent. Putting on a socket, I wouldn't say it's snap-on strong, just because there are some, I've run into several snap-on ratchets which have detents that are so strong you need a pry bar to pull the socket off. This isn't quite that strong, but it is a Armstrong, so it is still a pretty stout, I'd say on the upper end of how stout the detent is. So this certainly will hold a long extension with a big socket without falling off, so I don't mind that at all. Let's take a quick look inside. I still occasionally get comments, people have trouble with these rings. Almost all these rings will have a little notch. Some of them don't, so you have to get the pick kind of just under the edge and pry it out, but most have a notch to be able to just get access to it. And you just take the pick, get it under the notch like that, and as soon as you got it, then you just pull the pick around, don't poke yourself, and you just work it around. It's just the opposite to put the ring on. It's, you just kind of get the first edge started, and then use like a little flathead screwdriver to work its way around, and that's all there is to removing those little snap rings. Pop this off. Man, that is a tight fit. And Armstrong is doing something I've actually never seen before. Every ratchet I've ever taken apart that's been a round head has been one solid piece, but this is really interesting, and maybe it's due to the grade of steel. Even though sheet metal is often criticized, sheet steel is a forged form of steel because it has to go through rollers to roll it out into the plate. And that rolling action really extends the crystalline structure, and actually sheet metal can be very strong. And maybe that's why Armstrong did this. They used a stack of 3 sheet stamped and obviously hardened alloy steel layers in order to make each one of these Pawl sets, which is really interesting. And these truly are, you know, little individual Pawl teeth, but just 3 of them in a stack. And it is really pretty interesting that he did that. We can see that they are triple tooth, which is nice. And once again, it is a double-sided ratchet. Because of that design choice, there's a couple other design choices that also actually make this unique. So what they've done, since they have the 3 layers, you can see the little ball detent that sits behind is actually right in the center of the pawls on both sides. So usually in these ratchets, one of these is offset high, one is offset low because they're one solid piece. And the one that's offset high rides right against the bottom edge of the surface to prevent this reverse knob from popping out. So on this one, since the balls are right in the center, how they do that, I was just noticing, you can see right here, there's a roll pin on this side and a roll pin on this side that are sitting in a little groove, meaning this is going to be a real adventure to try to take apart. You have to use like a little tiny screw or something to try to extract those roll pins. It is possible that there's a hole so you can drive kind of the pins all the way through, but in order for this, you know, to rotate, it's just going to have a groove undercut little round piece that goes in there rather than actually, you know, having a whole a slot that goes all the way through it, because that'd probably make it too weak. So I don't know if when you rebuild these, if they just send you this whole assembly and that's how you end up rebuilding it. And judging by the ratchet pawls, I don't know if actually both sets of pawls are engaging at the same time. The way it's making that tick-tock sound, we can see that it's really pretty coarse. So it may just be a 40-tooth ratchet where they're using both sets of pawls just to make it extra heavy duty. Or these pawls could be just ever so slightly offset, so that one set of pawls is engaging and then the other set of pawls is engaging, kind of in the in-between, giving you an effective 80-tooth ratchet. And that's what they're doing here. It's an effective 80-tooth ratchet, because we can tell I've got it halfway in there, and you can hear click, one click, and see that one didn't seat. Now that seats. Other one seats. This one seats. So that's how they're offsetting those and giving you effectively twice as many teeth. And if you really put it under a lot of torque and it starts to like stretch some of the teeth, which can't happen in round head ratchets, then the second set of pawls engages and really gives it extra strength. So they're kind of the best in both worlds doing it that way. So that's my overly wordy video about this Armstrong half-inch drive round head ratchet. Pretty heavy duty, as you'd expect. Armstrong was a big name in government and industrial kind of contract tools. That's what kept them going for so long, and really they ended up getting bought out and then shut down, but they really did. They were pretty respectful tools, right up there with the Snap-ons, Max, Protos, and SKs. A lot of people who have Armstrong tools will certainly vouch that they were good. And this round head ratchet actually didn't disappoint. There's a lot of custom machine work and a unique, kind of a specialized, unique design with the stacked pawls that they have in there. Twin pawl, offset pawl design. And now that it's been lubricated, really sounds nice. And to boot, strong detent and really good manufacturing tolerances. It's a round head that doesn't have a real floppy anvil, which is just a nice bonus. And so I'm actually pretty stoked to have added, I believe this is my first Armstrong ratchet I've ever actually had. And even though it's a round head, it certainly is a nice heavy-duty ratchet. Just too bad somebody had the bright idea to take it to a bench grinder. I'll have to admit, those grooves, I mean, you could have just the absolute muddiest, dirtiest cake grease hands, and you'll have a nice grip on this ratchet. That's for sure. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.